convicted, and your heart completely open to her. But it's a nice thing, surely, to be familiar with a lot of subjects. Well, in that case, let us retain just as much of them as we need. Would you consider a person open to criticism for putting superfluous objects on the same level as really useful ones by arranging on display in his house a whole array of costly articles, but not for cluttering himself up with a lot of superfluous furniture in the way of learning? To want to know more than is sufficient is a form of intemperance, apart from which this kind of obsession with the liberal arts turns people into pedantic, irritating, tactless, self-satisfied bores, not learning what they need simply because they spend their time learning things they will never need. The scholar Didymus wrote 4,000 works. I should feel sorry for him if he had merely read so many useless works. In these works, he discusses such questions as Homer's origin, who was Aeneas' real mother, whether Anacreon's manner of life was more that of a lecher or that of a drunkard, whether Sappho slept with anyone who asked her, and other things that would be better unlearned if one actually knew them. Don't you go and tell me now that life is long enough for this sort of thing. When you come to writers in our own school, for that matter, I'll show you plenty of works which could do with some ruthless pruning. It costs a person an enormous amount of time and other people's ears an enormous amount of boredom before he earns such compliments as, "What a learned person." Let's be content with the much less fashionable label, "What a good man." What about thinking how much time you lose through constantly being taken up with official matters, private matters, or ordinary everyday matters, through sleep, through ill health? Measure your life. It just does not have room for so much. I've been speaking about liberal studies, yet look at the amount of useless and superfluous matter to be found in the philosophers. Even they have descended to the level of drawing distinctions between the uses of different syllables and discussing the proper meanings of prepositions and conjunctions. They have come to envy the philologist and the mathematician, and they have taken over all the inessential elements in those studies, with the result that they know more about devoting care and attention to their speech than about devoting such attention to their lives. Listen, and let me show you the sorry consequences to which subtlety carried too far can lead, and what an enemy it is to truth. Protagoras declares that it is possible to argue either side of any question with equal force, even the question whether or not one can equally argue either side of any question. Now, Siphones declares that of the things which appear to us to exist, none exists any more than it does not exist. Parmenides declares that of all these phenomena, none exists except the whole. Zeno of Elea has dismissed all such difficulties by introducing another. He declares that nothing exists. The Pyrrhonian, Megarian, Eretrian, and academic schools pursue more or less similar lines. The last named have introduced a new branch of knowledge, non-knowledge. Well, all these theories you should just toss on top of that heap of superfluous liberal studies. The people I first mentioned provide me with knowledge which is not going to be of any use to me, while the others snatch away from me any hopes of ever acquiring any knowledge at all. Superfluous knowledge would be preferable to no knowledge. One side offers me no guiding light to direct my vision towards the truth, while the other just gouges my eyes out. If I believe Protagoras, there is nothing certain in the universe. If I believe Nausiphones, there is just the one certainty, that nothing is certain. If Parmenides, only one thing exists. If Zeno, not even one. Then what are we? The things that surround us, the things on which we live, what are they? Our whole universe is no more than a semblance of reality, perhaps a deceptive semblance, perhaps one without substance altogether. I should find it difficult to say which of these people annoy me most, those who would have us know nothing, or the ones who refuse even to leave us the small satisfaction of knowing that we know nothing. Letter number 90. Who can doubt, my dear Lucilius, that life is the gift of the immortal gods, but that living well is the gift of philosophy? A corollary of this would be the certain conclusion that our debt to philosophy is greater than the debt we owe to the gods, by just so much as a good life is more of a blessing than simply life, had it not been for the fact that philosophy itself was something bestowed by the gods. They have given no one the present of a knowledge of philosophy, but everyone the means of acquiring it. For if they have made philosophy a blessing given to all and sundry, if we were born in a state of moral enlightenment, wisdom would have been deprived of the best thing about her, that she isn't one of the things which fortune either gives us or doesn't. As things are, there is about wisdom a nobility and magnificence in the fact that she doesn't just fall to a person's lot, that each man owes her to his own efforts, that one doesn't go to anyone other than oneself to find her. What would you have worth looking up to in philosophy if she were handed out free? Philosophy has the single task of discovering the truth about the divine and human worlds. The religious conscience, the sense of duty, justice, and all the rest of the close-knit, interdependent company of virtues never leave her side. Philosophy has taught men to worship what is divine, to love what is human, telling us that with the gods belongs authority, and among human beings fellowship. That fellowship lasted for a long time intact before men's greed broke society up, and impoverished even those she had brought most riches, for people cease to possess everything as soon as they want everything for themselves. The first men on this earth, however, and their immediate descendants followed nature unspoiled. They took a single person as their leader and their law, freely submitting to the decisions of an individual of superior merit. It is nature's way to subordinate the worst to the better. With dumb animals, indeed, the ones who dominate the group are either the biggest or the fiercest. The bull who leads the herd is not the weakling, but the one whose bulk and brawn has brought it victory over the other males. In a herd of elephants, the tallest is the leader. Among human beings, the highest merit means the highest position. So they used to choose their ruler for his character. Hence peoples were supremely fortunate when among them a man could never be more powerful than others unless he was a better man than they were. For there is nothing dangerous in a man's having as much power as he likes if he takes the view that he has power to do only what it is his duty to do. In that age, then, which people commonly refer to as the Golden Age, government, so Posidonius maintains, was in the hands of the wise. They kept the peace, protected the weaker from the stronger, urged and dissuaded, pointed out what was advantageous and what was not. Their ability to look ahead ensured that their peoples never went short of anything, whilst their bravery averted dangers, and their devotedness brought well-being and prosperity to their subjects. To govern was to serve, not to rule. No one used to try out the extent of his power over those whom he owed that power in the first place, and no one had either reason or inclination to perpetuate injustice, since people governing well were equally well obeyed, and a king could issue no greater threat to disobedient subjects than that of his own abdication. But with the gradual infiltration of the vices and the resultant transformation of kingships into tyrannies, the need arose for laws which were themselves, to begin with, drafted by the wise. Solon, who established Athens as a democratic state, was one of the 7 men of antiquity celebrated for their wisdom. If the same age had produced Lycurgus, an 8th name would have been added to that revered number. The laws of Zaleucus and Corundus are still admired, and it was not in public life or in the chambers of lawyers that these 2 men learned the constitutional principles which they were to establish in Sicily, then in its heyday, and throughout the Greek areas of Italy, but in the secret retreat, now hallowed and famous, of Pythagoras. Thus far, I agree with Posidonius. But that philosophy discovered the techniques employed in everyday life, that I refuse to admit. I will not claim for philosophy a fame that belongs to technology. It was philosophy, says Posidonius, that taught men how to raise buildings at a time when they were widely dispersed, and their shelter consisted of huts or burrowed-out cliffs or hollowed tree trunks. I, for my part, cannot believe that philosophy was responsible for the invention of these modern feats of engineering that rise up story after story, of the cities of today, crowding one against the next, any more than of our fish tanks, those enclosures designed to save men's gluttony from having to run the risk of storms, and to ensure extravagance safe harbours of her own, however wildly the high seas may be raging, in which to fatten separately the different kinds of fish. Are you really going to tell me that philosophy taught the world to use keys and bolts on doors, which was surely nothing but a signal for greed? Was it philosophy that reared the towering buildings we know today, with all the danger they mean to the people living in them? It was not enough, presumably, for man to avail himself of whatever cover came to hand, to have found a shelter of some kind or other in nature, without trouble and without the use of skills. Believe me, that age before the